Hi there. In this video, we'll be looking at conditional price rates, and we'll be taking you through a step-by-step guide on how to make the most out of this helpful tool. Let's get started. Conditional price rates are special hire charges that, on their own, don't have monetary value, but are instead tools to automatically select a rate from the charges matrix based on conditions you've set up. For example, assigning your weekday price rate to any weekday bookings, etc. Think of these as a set of filters that the booking will pass through until it matches one of the branches, therefore selecting a price rate. You assign conditional price rates to your customers exactly as you do with any other hire charge by adding a booking type and linking the chosen rate that way. By choosing conditional rate, however, you can skip assigning new booking types to the customer for each hire charge and instead just assign the one conditional rate, which will then do the rest for you for each booking. There's quite a lot of information to go through, so we recommend that you watch the whole video through before you start entering your conditional price rates. While it might take a bit of time to set these up, it will ultimately save you time in the long run and be much more accurate later on when invoicing your customers. Initial setup. Before you start setting up your conditional rates, make sure you've set up the following. 1. Your rooms. 2. Your charges matrix. And 3. Your booking types. Create a new conditional rate. To create a new rate, go to the Charges matrix in the Admin section, click on Manage Hire Charges and Conditional Rates, and then Create New Hire Charge. Enter the name of this new rate. Select Conditional in the Rate Type box, and then add any notes you'd like to include. Once selected, you'll see a panel appear below this section titled Set Conditional Price Rate. Entering the price rate logic. So how does this work? A conditional price rate is made up of branches. A branch is a set of one or more conditions that ends with a single hire charge from your charges matrix. A condition is made up of a property and a state. A property is info about the booking, such as the start date, rooms used, booking duration, etc. The states available depend on the property selected. For example, for the booking duration property, you could have a state of more than, less than, or exactly a certain number of hours. For a branch to match, all of the conditions in that branch must be true. If any conditions are not true, then the system will check the next branch until it comes across one that does match. If 2 or more branches are both true, then whichever appears first in the list is used. You can reorder your branches using the provided arrow buttons. When a branch matches the price rate, that branch will be used. If none of the branches match, then the hire charge selected in the final Otherwise drop-down menu at the bottom of the page will be used. Please note that the logic you've entered for this price rate may work out so that there is always a matching branch, in which case this final Otherwise box can be ignored. However, it cannot be removed purely so that the system has a catch-all in place. We'll start with a simple example of a common scenario. You might find that your venue charges a different price rate depending on if the booking is on a weekday or a weekend. You've already set up your weekend prices as a hire charge called Standard Weekend, and your weekday prices as Standard Weekday. These are both hourly rates, and the cost of these can be seen in the Charges matrix. First, we'll select the Start Date property from the drop-down menu. When we select this, the State drop-down menu will fill in with the relevant states for that property. We then select the Weekend Day state, so that this branch matches when the booking in question starts on a weekend. Next, we select the rate we want to be used when this branch matches, in this case, Standard Weekend, hourly. If this branch does not match, then we move on. In the final Otherwise box, we select Standard Weekday, hourly, because we've already determined that the booking does not start on a weekend. If you go through reading the text on this page, you should find that you're basically just reading out the logic you want in plain English. For this example, if start date is a weekend day, then standard weekend, hourly. Otherwise, standard weekday, hourly. and that's it. The first conditional price rate is finished and can now be assigned to our customers. Next, we'll cover a slightly more complicated example. For this example, we'll continue to build on the previous logic we've set up. In this scenario, we still have our weekend and weekday prices, but we charge extra for bookings with more than 20 attendees. Bookings of more than 20 attendees are put on large group rates. Currently, our first branch only has one condition checking if the booking starts on a weekend. We now, however, also want to check if the number of attendees is more than 20. To add another condition, we use the AND button. When we press this button, another condition is added to the branch where we can then select the number of attendees property. We then select the more than state. You'll see that this state has an extra input for you to enter a number of people, in this case 20. If you want to remove an added condition, just press the red dustbin icon. With these two conditions entered, the first branch is finished and we can now add the next. To add a new branch, click on the plus button. You'll see that the new branch is separated from the previous branch by the word otherwise. This is to indicate that this branch will only be checked if the above branch is not matched. You can remove added branches using the red dustbin icon. This next branch will be used to cover weekday bookings for large groups. As we did with the previous branch, we select the start date property, but instead select is a weekday for the state. Then we add another condition, the same as before, with number of attendees is more than 20. We repeat these steps for the next two branches to cover weekend and weekday bookings for small groups, which we indicate by checking that the number of attendees is less than 21. With our branches now entered, we can check through the logic. For example, in order for the first branch in the list to match, the booking in question must start on a weekday and have more than 20 attendees. If either of these things is not true, then this branch cannot match, and the system will check the next branch, and so on. You may have noticed that some of the conditions in this example aren't actually needed, and the logic could be simplified to have fewer properties and conditions. This is certainly the case. The example here has been written out very explicitly for clarity's sake, and if you prefer to write the logic out in the more verbose way, then that will work just fine. Likewise, if you prefer to have more concise logic, you can set this up in the same way. Taking the previous example again, you will see that every possible outcome of the rate has been explicitly entered. Assume the booking we are dealing with takes place on a weekend and has 10 attendees. We're expecting this booking, therefore, to be using our standard weekend hourly rate. Take these two branches. The first condition of both branches checks if the current booking starts on a weekend. The second condition then checks the number of attendees. The first branch checks if the number of attendees is more than 20 people. If this is not true, then it moves on to the next branch. The second branch then checks if the number of attendees is less than 21, which for our example booking with 10 attendees is indeed true, so the standard weekend rate is used. Since we're only using whole numbers, if a booking is not more than 20, then it can only be less than 21. As such, the second branch does not need to check for this explicitly, as we already know that if the previous branch does not match, then the number of attendees has to be less than 21. So this branch could be simplified down to... Additionally, from this example, take the final branch. This is effectively checking that if none of the previous branches matched, is the booking on a weekday, and is the number of attendees less than 21? If so, use the standard weekday rate. As mentioned previously, every conditional price rate ends with a catch-all result. You can think of this as an if none of the above are true result. In this example, the previous branches have already checked 1. Does the booking start on a weekend? If so, are there more than 20 attendees? 2. If the above is not true, then does the booking start on a weekday? If so, are there more than 20 attendees? And 3. If neither of the above are true, then does the booking start on a weekend? So if we've reached this fourth branch, we've already ruled out that the booking does not start on a weekend and does not have more than 20 attendees. Since we aren't checking any other details for this example, we know that our fourth branch is just explicitly checking are none of the above branches true? In which case it could be removed altogether, as we already have a none of the above option by default. After applying the reductions discussed, the whole price rate logic now looks like this. This logic is exactly the same as the original example, and all of the results will come out exactly the same using either method. The original example was being strictly explicit, and every outcome was written out specifically, and the catch-all result was never met. This simplified example allows conditions to be implicit, so only the conditions that are specifically needed are written out, and any conditions that are implied have been reduced out to produce more minimal logic. Which of these methods you use is entirely down to personal preference. Being more explicit can help make the logic easier to read and write out. Being more implicit can help reduce the amount of information you have to enter, and therefore reduce the risk of typing mistakes, and can make for a more efficient set of branches and conditions. Things to watch out for. The final thing we want to cover is a few items that you should watch out for when setting up your rates. These are small issues that could make your rates come out wrong, but might go unnoticed if you aren't looking for them specifically. 1. If a branch contradicts itself, then it can never match. Take this example branch. In this branch, we're first checking if the booking starts on a weekday. If this is true, then we can check the second condition. Does the booking start on a weekend day? Since a booking cannot start on both a weekend and a weekday, this branch will never match as true. In a situation like this, it's likely that the second condition was accidentally added and does not need to be there. This would be resolved by removing the contradicting condition using the dustbin icon next to the Add button. 2. The order of your branches matters. Take these two branches for our pricing structure here. Weekday bookings with more than 20 people should use the large group weekday rate, and other weekday bookings use the standard weekday rate. You may have already noticed where the problem with the logic above is, but we'll run through each branch step by step with an imaginary example booking. The example booking is a weekday booking with 50 attendees. We're therefore expecting the rate to be large group weekday. We start at the first branch. If this branch matches, we should get the standard weekday rate. Then check the first condition of this branch. If start date is a weekday, this condition is true. The booking does indeed start on a weekday, and since there are no other conditions in this branch to check, we know that this branch matches as true, and we therefore get to the standard weekday rate. But that's not what we were expecting, so what happened? As we mentioned before, the first branch to match is the one that's used, regardless of if there are other branches that also match later on. So in this instance, had our first condition been second instead, we would have had the expected rate come out as seen here. Here we come back to the idea of conditions being explicit or implicit. Had we been writing out our logic explicitly, for example, specifically checking that the number of attendees was less than 21 in order to get the standard weekday rate, then it would not have mattered which branch came first, as they could not both be true. This basically means that you need to make sure your branches are in the correct order for your logic to work. You can reorder the branches using the up and down arrows next to the otherwise label. When you're done setting up your rate, press the Save button. You'll then see the new rate showing in your list of hire charges. You can use the marker to set this as the default price rate, so all new booking requests use this rate to start with unless you change it. Lastly, you can assign this price rate to any existing customers or administrators, just like you do with any other hire charge. Thanks for watching our video on conditional price rates. We recommend that you also have a look at the document called Conditional Price Rates Guide, which can be found on the dashboard. Be sure to also check out the other properties and states that are available for your rates, so you can tailor the system to work with your particular pricing structure. In this resources section, you'll also find more useful videos on how you can get the most out of your Hallmaster account. And for any other questions on how to use the system, make sure to check out the FAQ section for a comprehensive list of common customer questions, many featuring short video explainers. Thanks for watching.